Thank you all so much for being here. It's a great pleasure to be hosting the Lily and Nathan Ackerman lecture series on equality and justice. My name is Sherry Ryan. I'm the Dean of the Marx School of Public and International Affairs, and I'd like to welcome all of you. We're very excited for our guest speaker this evening. I'd like to extend my deepest thanks to Erwin and Rosalind Engelman. I understand Rosalind is on her way, and she and her husband are supporting this wonderful speaker series. And so when she comes in the room, let's all break and clap for her and her generosity. Okay. The Lily and Nathan Ackerman lecture series on equality and justice is named in honor of Rosalind's parents, and it's intended to shine light on major questions of equality and justice. So I'd like to introduce Marianne Engelman-Lado, who's here speaking this evening on behalf of the Engelman-Ackerman family. There's a lot of family names to keep track of here. And she'll be telling us more about this very important gift. So Marianne's career as a lawyer and academic have been devoted to civil rights and environmental justice. After starting her career at the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund, she joined the faculty of the Marx School of Public and International Affairs at Baruch College and was offering courses here. Since that time, her experience includes many years in the nonprofit law sector and running environmental and climate justice clinics at Yale and Vermont Law School before she was tapped to join the Biden administration. She served as an appointee in the Office of General Counsel and led the newly created Office of Environmental Justice and External Civil Rights at the EPA before the end of the administration. She's now launching a new environmental justice initiative at NYU School of Law. Marianne has lectured widely and taught graduate law and undergraduate level courses. Her most recent writing focuses on civil rights enforcement in the environmental justice context and the role of lawyers in community-based movements for social change. Please join me in welcoming Marianne Engelman-Lado. Thank you.
Hi there. Good evening. Good evening. Okay. Well, thank you to the Marx School Dean, Sherry Ryan, Professor Anna D'Souza, the Ackerman Chair, and of course the Ackerman lecturer tonight, Mustafa Santiago Ali. I am always inspired by our guest speaker, by his activism and by his message, and I'm very much looking forward to his remarks. My deep appreciation to all of you in the room and also online tonight, and a big thanks also to Diana Lazov, who makes all this happen. Let's give her a round of applause. I bring appreciation from the Engelman family, which created this lecture series, as you just heard, in honor of my grandparents. And I want to, I guess when my mom comes in, call out my parents, Rosalind and Erwin Engelman, my mom will be in the room tonight with my sister, Madeline, without whom the Ackerman lecture series would not be possible. The core idea, as you said, of this series is to have a space where we grapple with issues of equality and justice. As we noted in the last Ackerman lecture, in April, goodness, this has never been more needed. And yet, just when we thought the attack on basic decency, on fairness, on justice couldn't get more virulent, we see the administration at the federal level decimating civil rights offices, weakening interpretations of civil rights laws, rescinding grants to low-income areas and environmentally overburdened communities of color, and raising serious questions of the rule of law. Just today, my law students and I met with a new client of our legal work who had successfully competed for a $5 million grant to fund activities working with disadvantaged communities, promoting the use of electric vehicles. The Department of Energy had awarded this organization the funds, an award that was about half of their budget, and they had jumped right into the work. A few weeks ago, out of the blue, the Department of Energy sent them a letter saying, sorry, your grant is done. We're terminating your grant because the administration's policy had changed. They were promised the funding through a competitive grant process, and now the organization faces the loss of the funds and was warned to stop all activities immediately. Through 2025, we have continued to see a world in which up is down and down is up. The president asked us to stop talking about the history of discrimination in this country and the deep scars that it has made on the landscape, on our society, and our policies. Just this week, the Trump administration resurrected a statue of Albert Pike, a Confederate general, in what may be taken as yet another symbol of the assertion of white supremacy. My grandparents, Nathan and Lily Ackerman, came to this country from Poland and Russia as a refuge, and they understood and they taught me that we ignore history, our own history, our country's history, at our peril, and that we ignore all forms of hatred at our peril. My grandmother, in particular, carefully told us the story of her life, so we would never forget where we came from, the impact of hatred, and the promise, or what she thought was the promise, of this country. We know that this country is imperfect, but to them, it held such promise. They would be shocked by what is going on today. They thought they were escaping hatred and extremism and moving to a new world, a democratic country, or a country with aspirations for democracy, which is why this lecture series is so important. It's critical that we understand our history and its imprint on the present. We can't hide behind a narrative of American exceptionalism rather than face realities. See, I'm the downer part, and Mustafa's the up part. A school of public affairs should absolutely hold a mirror to society and call on us in a clear-sighted way to acknowledge our past. And that provides a pathway for the future. On a more personal note, I don't know, Mustafa, when I first met you. It was a long time ago, but I do recall during the Obama administration when he was at EPA, and I used to regularly come just about every quarter to DC with community groups from across the country to discuss the need to address gross inequalities in exposure to pollution and the need for civil rights enforcement. Mustafa was consistently a trusted presence in government, deeply humane and also strategic, changing government from within. In fact, he's a model for me when I entered government, that it is possible to be deeply humane and try to change government from within. In the last 4 years, we sort of switched places. And I was at EPA, and he was on the outside at National Wildlife. But I knew we were rowing in the same direction, and always knew he would be honest and continue to speak the truth, even to me. I've also had the honor of being on a program with Mustafa in the past. And I think most recently it was at an awards ceremony and fundraiser in 2023 held by the North Carolina League of Conservation Voters. Then, as now, I was happy to speak before Mustafa rather than afterward. To say he's a hard act to follow is an understatement. Mustafa wowed everyone in the room with a multimedia presentation, reminding us, I was probably clicking, reminding everyone of the as a newspaper article later picked up, of the self-evident truths in the Declaration of Independence, that all men and women, a little tweak there, but all men and women are created equal and are endowed with inalienable rights. He called on us to remember those words, the words our country were founded upon, and asked us to be courageous in our actions, to make those words, that aspiration, a reality. That message, a message of hope, of aspiration, is needed now more than ever. And I look forward to his talk tonight, creating a better future together. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Marianne. It's now my pleasure to introduce our Marks Ackerman Chair, Professor Anna D'Souza. She's in her 12th year at the Marks School. She's a development economist who studies issues related to food and nutrition security, price shocks, conflict, governance, and trade. Before joining Baruch, she worked as a research economist at the Economic Research Service of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, where she received the USDA Secretary's Honor Award. She's worked as an adjunct professor at the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies, a consultant for the World Bank, and a Peace Corps volunteer in Senegal. She received a BS in Finance and Economics from the Stern School of Business at NYU and an MS and PhD in Economics from UCLA. It's my great pleasure to introduce Anna D'Souza.
Good evening, everyone. Come on, students, let's go. Good evening, everyone. Hi, and hi to everyone there online. Thank you for watching. And for those of you who are watching later on the video, thank you as well. I'm very, very happy to be here this evening with all of you. I, too, look forward to the inspiring lecture. That is partially, actually, why I chose Mustafa Santiago Ali to be our speaker this semester. I don't want to go into the details, but reading the news has been very challenging on a daily basis, and I know that some of you in this room are feeling that too. And the reality is there are many of us who care deeply about this country and don't know what to do. You know, my students say this to me, faculty say this, other staff members. People have just been completely demoralized, and it's been challenging myself. Looking back several years ago, with the Mark's DEI committee, we created this series of weekly DEI Fridays, they were called, and this was kind of during the pandemic, so they were on Zoom, and a lot of people showed up, and people were excited and motivated, even during the pandemic. They were really excited to make change. This came, after the massive protests, after the death of murder of George Floyd. And there was a real spark around here, I felt, during that time period. And I think that we need to find that courage inside of us. And those of us who are very involved with DEI activities that have since maybe fallen away or been taken away, I think we have to figure out different ways to address the problems and the challenges that we see. We're going to be talking about some environmental justice problems, economic justice, social justice, racial justice, and Marianne kind of lay the framework a lot, so I don't want to speak a lot more except to say that I am here both as the Ackerman chair, but also as someone who is seeking inspiration and is feeling stuck sometimes in what I can do personally in my own community, which includes Baruch College community, but also includes where I live, also includes kind of the broader community here in New York City. And so I ask you to think, as we hear Mustafa lecture tonight, to think about how this can be taken home with you after this. Let this not be a lecture that inspires, but that kind of creates some changes in your lives, little sparks. That's what I'm hoping for this evening. And so I'll stop there. I'll do all my thank yous afterwards. But for now, I think we should just get to our speaker, because I know some of you have to go to class in a little while, so thank you for being here. So let me introduce our speaker. Mustafa Santiago Ali is the Executive Vice President at the National Wildlife Federation and the founder and CEO of Revitalization Strategies. He is a prominent advocate for public health, environmental justice, and climate change with over 30 years of experience at the intersection of policy, community engagement, and sustainability. Previously, he served as the interim chief of programs at the Union of Concerned Scientists and as the senior vice president at the Hip Hop Caucus, where he connected the hip hop community to civic action. His career began at the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, where he was a founding member of the Office of Environmental Justice and later served as the senior advisor for environmental justice and community revitalization, and the associate administrator for the Office of Enforcement and Compliance Assurance. Mustafa has worked with over 1,000 communities around the world to tackle environmental, health, and economic disparities. In 2019, he co-designed and moderated the first presidential forum on environmental justice. He has also advised numerous Fortune 500 companies on how to incorporate equity into their programs and policies. In 2020, he launched the Clean Economy of Color Coalition to empower entrepreneurs and communities to take advantage of opportunities arising from federal initiatives such as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Deal and the Inflation Reduction Act. Mustafa is a prominent figure in the media, having made appearances on major networks such as ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, CNN, Roland Martin Unfiltered, and Democracy Now! He has been featured in over 300 publications and is an award-winning writer and poet, on top of all that other stuff, okay? Just take that in for a moment. In 2024, he presented his poetry at the White House. Mustafa serves on several boards, including the Environmental Film Festival, Netflix, the Green Sports Foundation, the Weather Channel, the Union of Concerned Scientists, and the NAACP Image Awards. He is also a commissioner for the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. His work inspires and drives systemic change. Mustafa, welcome. We're so happy to have you here. Maybe I'll take one moment as Mustafa sets up to just welcome our guests. Do you all remember what we were supposed to do when they come in? All right. Rosalind, we are so happy to have you here. And is it Marilyn? Is that correct? Yeah, Marion and Madeline. Okay, thank you very much for being here. Well, we really appreciate it. You're just in time for our speaker. Thanks.
Hello. Hey, it's good to see you. How's everybody doing? Well, let's try it again when we get the mic on. How's everybody doing? All right. Well, it's an honor and a blessing to be here with you. Thank you to the Engelman family, the Ackerman family. Thank you to everyone who's here tonight, because there's lots of places you could be. I know some folks got to go to class, and some folks from community have all kinds of things that you could be doing as well. So it's an honor and a blessing to be able to stand here with you tonight and to be in community with you. I've given thousands and thousands of lectures and speeches and all those types of things, and I always give honor to my mother and my grandmother, who are the rocks that I stand on. By a show of hand, how many folks in the room love your mother or your grandmother? Raise your hand. Everybody look around, hold your hands up high. Find the people just having some problems. I was in North Carolina, actually, a different time, and there was a gentleman walked up to me, and he was like, I appreciate you talking about your mother and your grandmother. He's like, but did you have a daddy? And did you have a grandfather? And I was like, yes. I mean, they were amazing also, and they were a part of my journey. My grandfather was a farmer and a coal miner, and then my father was an engineer, but it's an interesting dynamic. My grandfather focused on workers' rights and civil rights, right? The time that he was coming up. And my dad took the mantle and he worked on workers' rights. So when I was really little, I used to sit right beside my grandfather, and one of the things that he grew was apples. And he would peel these apples. And he had this amazing ability to take this penknife and just go around a complete apple and take all of the skin off without ever breaking it. And he would cut off these little pieces. And I didn't know at that time why he was doing it. So I would sit right next to him. Men would come from all across the county to talk about workers' rights and the issues that needed to be addressed. And my grandfather would cut off a little piece of that apple and he would feed it to me. Now, maybe it was to keep me still, but I think it was also to help me to have a better understanding of patience and what is necessary to actually build movement. Does that make sense to everyone? So I've just been incredibly blessed on my journey to be able to listen and learn from some amazing folks. You're going to see some of the folks here tonight. One of the lessons that my mother passed to me from my grandmother is that she said, you have power unless you give it away. I want you to think about that in relationship to the things that we're going to talk about tonight, because lots of times people believe that they don't have power. And we sometimes live inside of systems that will reinforce that. But I hope by the time that I'm finished tonight that you will understand that you have power, you will see examples of how power plays out, and that you will make a decision to use power for good and to uplift. Is that all right with everyone? So there's a whole bunch of things that we could talk about. They told me I had like 20 to 40 minutes. One side of my family is Baptist and Pentecostal ministers, so I just want to let y'all know. Sometimes it takes a whole lot of time just to say good morning. A good friend and mentor passed away. Many of you know who she is, Jane. She used to have this saying that I thought I would bring forward for us tonight. I want you to just think about this in everything that you do in your life. Jane said that you cannot get through a single day without having an impact on the world around you. What you do makes a difference. Decide what kind of difference you want to make. We often wait for systems to make a difference, right? Sometimes governments, sometimes organizations, institutions. It always starts with us. And yes, they have a responsibility, and we will talk about that. But I hope that you'll be reminded that there are 4 pillars that I'm going to operate from tonight. So one of them is the Declaration of Independence. And I was blessed that my good friend actually remembered something that I said, so I must have done something right that day. But it's interesting. When I was really young, I remember the Declaration of Independence from a teacher of mine. I talked about it one time in Philadelphia, actually, at an event. And they said, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal and endowed with certain unalienable rights: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, when we think about those words, we also have to make sure that we're understanding that for many vulnerable communities, both inside of our country, where those words are supposed to have meaning and accountability, and across the planet, that folks are just asking for basic amenities. They're asking for respect. They're asking for dignity. They're asking to be able to breathe clean air and drink water that is not polluted, to be able to grow food and land without having toxic chemicals. Those seem like basic things that people should be able to have, along with healthcare and housing that doesn't hurt you. But I'm always reminded how important this is and how we have to hold accountability in that space. The other principle I want to talk about tonight, and there are a number of things underneath of the Hippocratic Oath. I have a couple folks who are MDs in my family, and they always remind me of the main point that they live by is to do no harm. Imagine if policy did no harm. If policy was actually uplifting, if policy actually had the ability to help folks to heal, or to be able to make real change happen. So that's the second pillar I'm going to operate from. Now we're going to get a little bit different. Y'all heard that I was also at the Hip Hop Caucus. So I believe that there are also this genius that lives inside of artistry. And that's why I had to bring 2 folks into our conversation tonight as a part of our pillars. One of them is Nipsey Hussle. How many folks remember Nipsey? All right. Some folks still remember. Sometimes you have to take 2 steps back to take 10 forward. So sometimes folks are getting anchored in despair, in hopelessness, and believing that the things that they're seeing go on in Washington, D.C. will be forever. It can only be forever if we don't get engaged and help to make the change happen. But I appreciate how Nipsey framed it out. For those of you who followed Nipsey's work, not just being a rapper, he was also someone who was focused on revitalization, and in his community made sure that he was helping to change what was going on his block and the blocks that were surrounding. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And then, of course, Tupac. And I'm going to ask the question. I want y'all to raise your left hand. How many folks knew who Tupac was? I see. I'm going to put a country music slide in also, because I want to make sure that I'm inclusive and making sure everybody's getting love. The fourth part of the pillar tonight with Tupac is if you can make it through the night, there's a brighter day. Communities, the communities that I have worked with, even though there have been massive, massive challenges that they've had to endure, they always had a North Star. They always knew that if we can get X, Y, and Z in place, then we can begin to make change. And even if everybody is not going to get on board, we're still going to keep moving. And that's important in this moment, especially for the young people who are in the room tonight, because the challenges are real, but the sets of opportunity for us to make sure that there is a brighter day is incredibly important. Does that make sense to everyone? All right, I see some people nodding, so I must be doing okay. Audre Lorde. How many folks in this room know who Audre Lorde is? I know I'm on the business and economic side of the equation over here. Audre was an amazing writer, an amazing activist. She was also from where? New York, Harlem, and then Manhattan. So I'm gonna make sure tonight that I bring this flavor forward for you all of individuals who actually walked on the same sidewalks you may have walked on, whom you may not know as much about. The reason that I bring Audre into our conversation tonight is because she was one of the first people to start talking about intersectionality before it became vogue, before everybody started saying intersectionality on a number of things. Her truth was real. You know, she talks about there's no such thing as a single issue struggle. When you think about community, folks are dealing with housing issues, transportation issues, jobs issues, healthcare issues, environmental issues, and we can go on and on. So we have to make sure, as we are planning out how we're going to move forward to make change happen, that we understand that everyone has treasures, everyone has the ability to be a part of a process to make real change happen. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring Audre into our conversation as we're moving forward. Now, I like to keep it real. Marianne told you that. Other people will tell you that, because I believe that by understanding our history, we can make sure that we're moving forward in a direction that can eliminate some of the problems that we've had in the past. And I'm big on policy, right? Because policy can uplift, or policy can be, it can destroy, it can deconstruct, it can do a number of things. So policy, along with bigotry, racism, and a number of other things, was a driver. It was a driver in saying that we could go to Africa and enslave folks and bring them over here for free labor. That's just fact. That's just history, right? Policy also, you know, made it so that the genocide of our indigenous brothers and sisters could happen. That's just real. Policy had the Chinese Exclusion Act. Policy allowed Japanese internment camps. And we can go down the list of folks who are immigrants to this country who policy in many instances has impacted. So we gotta keep it real on the negative side of policy so that we can make sure that we're moving toward the policy, positive side of policy. Restrictive covenances. How many folks know about restrictive covenances in this room? All right, a few less. And then we've also got redlining. All these things often push people into sacrifice zones. And then we disinvest in those areas. And that's just the dynamic. It was a dynamic here in New York City, just like it was in the South. And sometimes we only think that these types of things happen in certain parts of our country. Policy is also right here in 2025, right? You all have seen Project 2025. You've seen the things that have happened where the elimination of massive programs. And the interesting thing is when you unpack that, many of these programs that they've went after, and there's a laundry list of them, are ones that communities had advocated for and fought for decades and decades and decades. So whether it is the elimination of environmental justice at EPA, or the attacks on climate and science, and removal of the resources that were necessary and the people. And we can go down the list at HUD and transportation, at CDC and HHS. There's just a number of things that are going on in relationship to policy now. But we'll keep moving. This is your quick public service announcement. Elections have consequences. Let me walk to the back of the room here and say this again. Elections have consequences. A lot of folks decided to sit on the couch. A lot of folks have been fooled into believing that if I vote, nothing is going to change. And that is incorrect. Now we're back to our regularly scheduled programming. Margaret Mead once said to never doubt that a small group of thoughtful and committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. How many folks in the room believe that? All right. So we only got about 15% of the folks in the room who believe that people can actually make change. Or did I not state the question clearly? I think you'll change your mind, because we have numerous examples of how change has happened. It's never perfect. Sometimes it's messy and bumpy. But if we look at the women's suffrage movement as one example, Even though it's not completely 100% played out yet, we know that change can happen. Now, I want you to pay attention to some things here. When we talk about many of these social movements through the history of America, and it's in other countries as well, young people have played a critical role, right? I come from an intergenerational set of work and movement, but we've got to make sure that we're honoring the young people, both in the past and in this moment, who continue to try and make things better. And many of the younger women then said, well, wait a minute, this is not right. I'm not trying to live underneath of this paradigm, and I'm going to get engaged. And of course, there were others who were also playing a role. And then if you look at the civil rights movement, you'll find some very similar dynamics. You had very young children who were a part of it, and then you had our elders who were a part of it as well. You had black folks and Jewish folks, and you had indigenous folks, and numbers of different types of people who came together to actually be able to push the envelope and move us in a more positive direction. When you look at the early environmental movement, and there may be some folks in the room who remember it or have read about it, but that was young people who were actually saying, wait a minute, we got rivers catching on fire. Can you all imagine that? And there was a river here that also had so much pollution in it. People talk about the Cuyahoga River in Ohio. In cities, you literally could not see the sun because there was so much pollution. And a whole bunch of folks, Republicans and Democrats, folks who had wealth and those who were lower wealth, were getting together to actually help to push to make change happen. And out of that, you had the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, the National Environmental Policy Act, you have Endangered Species Act, you have all these things that were beginning to percolate and be able to move forward, and that's because people got engaged and because they believe that if I just do my little bit, I can help make change happen. And that's what we also need in this moment. And of course, that picture on the far right-hand side is Warren County, North Carolina. It's one, let me say that again, it's one of the flashpoints for the environmental justice movement, where folks were literally willing to lay down in the road to stop those trucks from coming in with those cancer-causing chemicals, those PCBs, right? And if we want to get into a deep science conversation, we can unpack what each of these chemicals does. But I want you to pay particular attention to the folks who are laying in the road. Those are children that were willing to actually do that. Lots of folks got arrested down there. Walter Fauntleroy went down. He was a representative from DC at that time. He came back and began the journey around science and data and information to be able to sync up with what communities were saying was happening with the data that was so critically necessary. And that's one of the reasons when you see people attacking science from the political side, is because they understand that inside of science, inside of data, inside of information is power, because it helps to make decisions about who gets what resources and what are the steps that are necessary to better help to protect people or not protect people. All of these people play a role in the moments that we find ourselves in now. Welcome. You can't have a movement without people. And I always want to bring forward the faces of individuals. There's so many folks who are out there. But there are some people who are on this slide who literally are a train ride away. And I'm going to ask y'all later on if you know who some of these people are. Because if not, it helps to answer the question if you're asking yourself, well, how do I get engaged? Who are the folks that I can work with or listen to and learn from? And these are folks who have been on the ground doing the work, some for decades, others are brand new. I like this picture because it always reminds me and brings me back to the reality of why we do the work that we do. And for me, it is about both what's happening in this moment, but it's about the generations that are coming. How many folks know who James Baldwin is? Woo! For the folks who don't know who James Baldwin is, James Baldwin was amazing. I guess you would say I'm a Baldwinite because I have read so many of his pieces. Not only was he an amazing writer, but he was a great activist as well. I mean, he said that if I love you, I have to make you conscious of the things you don't see. Think about, for many folks in this room, you live in communities who often are unseen and unheard and disinvested in. Sometimes when you're a younger person, people don't pay attention because they think you don't have the wisdom yet. Or if you're an elder, that the ideas that you have were something that worked 50 years ago but might not work in this moment. When I think about that particular quote, it connects to so many people. And if we begin to see people and honor them and the humanity that exists in it, we can make real change happen. But sometimes we have to get past some of our stuff to be able to do the work. Let me ask y'all a question. How many folks in the room have taken a breath of air in the last 60 seconds? Raise your hand. I see non-air breathers all over the place. That's amazing. You know, I asked the question, I've done it thousands of times because it's incredibly important. It's an autonomic response. It's something that we do. You know, some folks take in a little more breath if you're younger than some other folks, but the numbers are interesting. Everybody do me a favor. Take a breath in. Hold it. Now you can let it out. Some folks need to take 2 breaths, I understand. You know, it's interesting. You see the numbers there. There was a Harvard study came about 4 years ago, talked about how many folks are dying prematurely from breathing in dirty air, right? And it's interesting when we think about that because some folks come from communities, and everybody should come from a community where the air is pristine, where you don't have to worry about getting cancer or liver or kidney diseases, or a number of others that are associated with breathing in dirty air, but that's the dynamic that we have currently going on in a number of locations across our country. How many folks in the room know someone who has asthma? So almost every person, about 4 or 5 folks don't know someone. We got about 25 million folks, that's a conservative number, who have asthma in our country, 7 million kids. We know that African American and Latino children are the ones that are going to the hospitals and to the emergency rooms, and we also know they're the ones that are dying disproportionately. But everyone is impacted in some form or fashion from what's going on in relationship to air pollution. Now, I knew I was going to be in the room with economists and some other folks, so I thought I'd bring some numbers into our conversation. Didn't want to overburden you with too much. And I also know there are some amazing folks who are in here who are going to make a huge amount of money when you graduate. How many folks with your right hand are looking forward to making a lot of money? How many folks are lying and saying you came to college not because you want to make a lot of money? Okay. I appreciate that. It should be for other reasons, and there's nothing wrong with you being able to make money and give back and do these different types of things. But here's the thing I want to focus on. $800 billion a year in costs are associated with the damages that come from air pollution. Every time you see, you know, those trucks and cars or power plants or a number of other types of things, being able to spew that out, you've got particulate matter, you've got a number of things that are going on, but there is a cost, there is a healthcare cost, and there are other costs that are also associated with, if we do this right, we can help to save money and save lives, and if we don't, and so we've got the global numbers that are here, $8.1 trillion a year. Imagine that. How much good can we do if we can solve this problem, which we can do? I wanted to bring in the Manchester community in Houston, Texas. Many people have also heard about communities in Cancer Alley, whether in Louisiana or West Virginia. There are all these places where you've got folks who are breathing these types of things. This picture is important, especially when there are students in the room, because I want you to think about if you come from one of these communities and you've been impacted, how much more difficult is it for you to make it to higher education because of all the impacts that are going on. In this community, and I've been there so many times, you literally can stand on people's front porch and back porch, reach your hand out and actually touch the fencing of these huge plants that are there. That's how close people are. And it's not just there, there are other locations also, but Texas has some really interesting zoning things going on. And then, of course, the water crises that are going on. Everybody remembers Jackson, Mississippi. Some folks remember Flint, and a number of other locations. And that's why the work that Mary Ann and so many other folks at EPA were doing was so incredibly important in helping to get the lead out, because you all already know the impacts from lead and the neurological problems, learning difficulties, so forth and so on. And so many communities, both in the rural and urban context, are still dealing with these things. And this is why community genius is so incredibly important, that I'm going to talk about in a second. And then, of course, and thank you again, and everyone else, because we used to have, I forget what the number was, 20 million lead lines or something like that. Then we got it down to about 14 million. Now there's still 9 million that's out there. And that's why if an administration comes in and if they are not fully supportive of making sure that we are addressing the lead problem, then they're actually impacting our kids and the next generations. And then one of the other things also is PFAS that so many folks are paying attention to, and rightly so. Those are the forever chemicals that you often hear about, and the impacts that are there. And these are just some numbers also that's associated with our country and the cost that's associated. And I had to put this one in there. Food deserts are always an issue. Food insecurity is always a significant issue. We got 47 million folks right now who are food insecure in our country. And in what, 3 days? I can't remember. I'm on so many places I can't remember. Saturday should be a fun day, shouldn't it? It should be a day when something positive is happening. But we may have that number increase because of SNAP benefits and a number of other things that will play out. If folks are getting paid significant money, don't do their job. And this is also important because how is, the things that are actually driving the climate crisis and these impacts that are happening in vulnerable communities, what is that product and how is it moving? And this slide just talks about 2.6 million miles of fossil fuel pipeline already in our country, that infrastructure. So think about this. When you hear somebody talking about drill, baby, drill, and we've got 2.6 million miles of already operational fossil fuel pipeline, how many folks, are there any scientists, astrophysicists in the room? No astrophysicists? Anybody who ever was interested in going to the moon? Anybody been to the moon? I asked the question with seriousness because when you think about 2.6 million miles of fossil fuel pipeline, we are 240,000-ish miles from the moon. I want to put it in perspective for you. 240,000 miles to the moon, depending on rotation and various things. So how many times can you go to the moon just with the pipeline that's in our country? 10 times. You're really close. Yeah. So we're going to go with your answer. Up and back, up and back, up and back. And it's a part of the work that we have to do. The genius of community is that it shows up in lots of different ways. Beyonce, I always give her a shout out. I mean, I hope there are folks in Jamaica, some of the artists who are there right now who will also be able to help support, along with so many other folks, in addressing what's going on. When they say that climate change isn't real, and now hurricanes are 4s and 5s, then we often are the ones who have to deal with folks who are denying the reality of what's going on. But we're blessed that there are a number of artists, and I spent time with the Hip Hop Caucus, who actually care and who are giving back, and that's a part of the community genius that I want to talk about. And this is just another slide of some of the other hurricanes that we've had to recently deal with as well. Now, this one is here with real intentionality. So we see the forest fires that are going on, right? And we understand that they continue to increase in Canada, in our country. It used to just be on the western side. Now there are also forest fires that are happening on the eastern side of the country as well. When I first started doing some of the work that I'm doing, one of the things I did was work with farm workers, right? So I want you to pay particular attention to the slide that is closest to me. These are individuals, while these major forest fires are going on, wildfires, who are still working in the field, right? Now, I want to overlay something. You are a person who's working in these fields, and you see the flames and the smoke that's here, and it used to be you had to keep your eyes on what's going on over here, but now you also have to wonder if somebody from ICE is going to be on this side of the equation. And the question then becomes, where do you go to, right? Because we've got this dynamic that's going on where if we are proposing a rule, and we used to have where folks would come in and share their comments, and now if you show up at a federal site because you have experience with something that's going on, whether it's air, water, or a number of other things, you may not feel comfortable enough in sharing your expertise, your lived experience, because of the dynamics that our country is currently going through, right? Does that make sense to everyone? So I want you to understand that the challenges that folks have always had to deal with now have these extra layers that are a part of it. And we have a responsibility to share and speak out in the form or fashion that best suits you. How do we make change happen? Damu Smith was one of my early mentors. I encourage you to Google his name. Damu was at the early part of the internet, so there's not a whole lot, but he's one of our greatest organizers in the history of our country, and we've had some really great ones. But one of the other ones is Dolores Huerta, who I've had the privilege of spending time with a number of times. And one of her quotes is, "Every moment is an organizing opportunity, every person a potential activist, and every minute a chance to change the world." And I think Dolores is now getting close to 90, so she's seen a lot in her lifetime, and she's done a lot. Community genius is about being able to pull folks together, about being able to honor, about having an understanding of the challenges that people have going on, but also the vision for being able to make change happen. And it is happening all around us. And in this moment, that means that we have to work with all kinds of different organizations, and each of them bringing their particular sets of expertise. But we've got to honor the roots of where this work comes from to be able to make change happen. And a part of community genius is also joy. Now, I know sometimes when I'm dealing with scientists and engineers and all these other types of folks, and I talk about joy, they're looking at me like I'm crazy. But joy is so incredibly important in this moment, and you've got to figure out what brings you joy, what is it that your passion is, and you'll be able to then sync up with all the work that is necessary in this moment. Does that make sense? By a show of hands, how many folks in the last, I better stretch it out because I done heard about some of y'all. How many folks in the last 7 days have experienced joy? All right. Maybe I'll go out further. 14 days. Joy, 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 joy. We got some Scrooges also in here, so. But the reality of the situation is that we work so hard, we're so focused, that we often forget to take time and focus on what brings us joy, right? When we have these messages, one of the failures of the climate movement was that we got so focused on numbers that we forgot about people, and then we also forgot about being able to have a message that also incorporated joy into what was going on. So I always appreciate my friend Ayana, who talks about what brings you joy, and it's incredibly important. You've got to be rooted in joy. And then folks are doing work. I was talking earlier about both New York and New Jersey and cumulative impacts. Folks have been trying for a long time to be able to get that into consideration, and now folks are doing it, and it will help to make change. There's still things. You know, when this administration came in, one of the things I worked on a long time ago was EJ Screen. It was a GIS. I know there's some folks who teach around GIS and some other mapping systems in the room today. But now the states are still doing it. So when you see the feds doing something, you also have to come down that next level or next 2 levels to actually understand the fullness of what's going on, who's stepping up. So whether it's California or Colorado, I would ask you to look at that final bullet down there, because there's a number of other states who are helping to make sure that communities and others have the tools that's necessary. We were having a conversation about transportation earlier. So these tools pull in all that information so that we can have a better understanding of what's going on in communities. And when I'm looking at tools, I'm also asking folks to make sure that you have data sets that not only are talking about housing, that are talking about transportation, that are talking about environmental impacts, but also find a way to talk about what are those positives in community, what are those treasures that exist, so that folks have a better understanding of what that looks like as well. But again, community genius, people getting engaged, making change happen. We were having a conversation around solar and some of the challenges that have been in that space. But the community genius is that young people are also creating their own businesses in this space. These are 2 folks who I know who've created their own businesses. And yes, there have been some slashes to money around renewable energy, but community is also surrounding folks and saying, you know what, maybe I was going to put off getting this, or churches and other faith-based institutions are saying, you know what, I'll step up and make sure that I'm supporting your business in this moment, because we understand that this is temporary, because the rest of the world is moving forward on renewable energies and businesses. So we've got to make sure that we continue to support the community genius that's going on. Community genius can also happen in philanthropy. 2 folks I want to call out who are here. One is Rihanna. Rihanna has been, always has been amazing, but she also makes sure that she uses her platforms and that she's making investments in communities, and organizations are actually doing, you know, just transformational work. And then I don't know Mackenzie, but I wish that I did. And not because I want her to give me some money, but because I appreciate the way her organization does philanthropy, right? They do their work on the front end, which is incredibly important, understanding the organizations that are out there, and then making sure that those organizations get the resources they need and getting out of the way so that they can do the work. So I very rarely ask you to clap for somebody, but I'm going to ask you to clap for folks in philanthropy who are doing it right. And she just gave one of the HBCUs like $30 million yesterday in Alabama. So she puts her money where it needs to go. Oh, as I said before, artistry is incredibly important. So whether it's the Clean Creatives or the Hip Hop Caucus, if you don't have artists as a part of the work that's going on, you are missing a huge component. Here's how I know it. When you look at the civil rights movement, we often see Dr. King or Reverend Abernathy or a number of these other folks who played an amazing and important role in moving the civil rights movement forward. But people don't talk about Mahalia Jackson. People don't talk about these various artists who played a role in helping to fund and support and help to build the infrastructure that's necessary. And in this moment, whether it is an artist who is local, regional, or national, they have huge platforms. Let me ask you a question. How many folks in the room have a favorite rapper or a favorite singer or a favorite poet or a favorite writer? If you do, raise your left hand. I just want to see who knows their left from their right. All right, leave your hands up. Leave your hands up. I'm coming. Who's your favorite artist?
Oh, my favorite artist? Yes. Oh, man. It's more of a group, not a single person. TLC.
TLC?
Yes.
Okay. Don't go chasing waterfalls. Why?
They were just very young and powerful for the time when I was young, growing up, listening to them, listening to their words, seeing them, the way they move, the way they evolved through, you know, hip hop and music, being so young and having to deal with a business that's ran by men. And so for me, that was just amazing. I looked up to them. They were role models for me and my friends growing up.
I appreciate that. When you walked in, I was like, is Faith Evans coming in here tonight? So, sister, you had also, who was your artist?
Nas.
Oh, Nas.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let me get a little closer now. Go ahead. Why Nas?
His vocabulary.
Okay, the vocabulary.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Anything else you want to add to that?
He's from Queens.
He's from Queens. Okay. I should have shouted out all the boroughs to see who was in the room tonight. All right, I'm coming to someone, so I'm going to try and remember who. Okay. You shouldn't raise your
Michael
hand.
Jackson.
Michael Jackson, Man in the Mirror, Thriller.
And he gave a lot of money.
He gave a lot of money. He did do a lot on the philanthropic side, and people often don't focus on that. Let me come over here. Yes, ma'am, I'm on my way. Hang on, I'm coming. All right.
I'm going to say Diana Ross because of a lot of her art was created to civil rights and culture.
All right, Diana Ross. All right. And one last one. Let me come to the table here. Let me see who I'm about to choose. And since you are the sister, and it's wonderful to see you.
Nice to see you too. Taj Mahal and Keb Mo.
Okay, and why?
I think they bridge cultures beautifully and they communicate that to a broad, expansive audience.
There it is. Yes. Let's give it up for the artists who are supporting the work. And that's why the Hip Hop Caucus and the creatives are so incredibly important. Community Genius also exists in these organizations. So many times folks will hear about the Regenesis Project in Spartanburg, South Carolina. You know, took a $20,000 environmental justice small grant, one of those programs that they got rid of. $300 million in changes, new housing, transportation routes, job creation, all the things that our communities often ask about. This is just one of a number of communities that are out there. Harold Mitchell, let me make sure I do this right. Harold Mitchell and the community there are the ones who drove this project. I think 124 partners over time to be able, and y'all from the north, so you might not understand. Let me go backwards. Let me give you a north-south thing real quick. So this is shotgun housing over here, right? Some of y'all maybe went down south and visited some parents or grandparents or something like that. This is the new housing that they built, green housing, $300-400 a month for the electricity cost before, got it down to $67, and then they had a plan for a solar farm to zero out their costs. That's community genius, right? But we often don't think about that. And then there are other examples of community genius. I can give you hundreds of them. Now, how many folks in this room are from New York? Raise your hand. Almost everybody is from New York. How many folks have at least lived in New York for 3 years? All right. Sometimes the professors, you never can tell, you know, they, let me do it right. How many folks from Jersey? There it is. I could tell, I saw her face and she was just like, why are you just talking about New York, Mustafa? Jersey also. So how many folks have ever been over to WEAC's headquarters? 2 people. All right. How many folks have been to Brooklyn to Uprose? 3 people. 4 people. So these are 2 folks that are literally in your backyard who are doing transformational work. WEAC has been doing it since the 90s. Uprose has been doing it as equally as long. Peggy Shepard is one of the co-founders of WEAC, and Elizabeth Jean-Pierre over at Uprose. They both use intergenerational models. They both be in the State House and the White House doing work and in the hood or the community. So you need to know these folks, and I would ask you to spend time listening and learning, and then figuring out what is your gift that you can help to share with the folks who are already down there doing the work. Whether it's on the energy democracy side, the health side, the environmental side, the housing side, folks are doing the work. That's community genius. When we talked about and we saw those numbers around food insecurity, there are a number of folks, both here in the city, on the outskirts, and all across the country, who are doing both urban food issues and rural. So these projects are out there where folks are growing fresh and nutritious food. And in this moment, folks need to be able to get back to the land, to be able to make sure that as these prices continue to go up or programs are being cut, that we're finding ways of being able to use community genius to make sure that we are feeding our people. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Community Genius happening in Florence, South Carolina. That's Reverend Leo Woodbury and members there. They've built training centers there. They also have built this center where they're actually doing emergency preparedness kits and passing those out to be able to help people to be able to not just survive, but to thrive when situations are going on. And I know I'm probably running short on time. Right here in your backyard, the Billion Oyster Project. How many folks have volunteered there? How many folks have heard of it? Okay, well, at least folks heard about it. I'm gonna need you to get up and get engaged. The Billion Oyster Project, if my numbers are right, about 130 million oysters have now been put back into the waterfront there. 3 million shells, they're there. 30,000 students have participated. So there's opportunities to be able to get engaged. It's helping to filter the water, to deal with some of the pollution that's in there. There's training that's going on. So there's all these amazing things that are happening through Community Genius. We just have to reach out and get engaged. How many folks remember or read about Hurricane Katrina? This is the 9th Ward. The 9th Ward was one of the most devastated areas from Hurricane Katrina. This is a Sankofa project that's there. They are training young people both on community restoration, on food related issues, and a number of other things. And it's happening in the 9th Ward where in many instances people are forgotten, but they're bringing forward conservation work, health related work, food justice related work, and a number of other things. And I would ask you, when you get a chance, Google Sankofa, 9th Ward. You'll be very, very impressed. You heard a little talk about the Clean Economy of Color Coalition. It's important for folks to be able to get together, to hear about new innovations, have an understanding of some of the challenges that have been out there, but also it always has to be highlighted about how folks are making it happen. Community Genius. Community Genius in Detroit by Donnell Wilkins and her training programs are there. What I like about Detroiters working for environmental justice and the Green Door Initiative is that returning citizens, unfortunately some folks get caught up, and some people get pushed into bad situations, but when they come home they need to have something that helps them to know that they are valuable and that they are contributing to the community. Donnell's work that's been going on there just speaks to that. I think she has a 96% rate of folks not going back into some previous problems they had and now being able to start their own businesses and have the training that's necessary. These are the types of things we got to make sure continue to be funded. And if the federal government isn't going to do it, then we've got to make sure our academic institutions and others are moving into the space along with philanthropy to help make change happen. And we're almost there. But I have to honor where I came from as a student a long time ago. There are all these amazing folks. You in this room are amazing. Sometimes we just need someone to let us know that we are. Sometimes we need somebody to put their arm around us. Sometimes we need somebody to just help guide us a little bit. But the HBCU Climate Change Consortium has had hundreds and hundreds of students who have presented, who have researched, and who are helping to make real change happen. So I got to give a shout out to Dr. Bob Bullard and Dr. Beverly Wright, who started this particular initiative, but it's the students who have kept it going all these years. And you've got folks from the Green New Deal, from the Sunrise Movement, This Is 0 Hour. There are literally hundreds of student-led organizations across the country who are continuing to push and make change happen. It's Community Genius. And this is why we do it. We got to make sure that people are respecting our vote. I never tell anybody who to vote for, but I do say vote for somebody who cares about your community, who cares about your future. And we have to do our own research to have an understanding of what we need to hold them accountable to and what we need to ask for. It's a part of Community Genius, and we're almost done. I shared with you in the beginning that my grandmother said that you have power unless you give it away. How many folks in the room believe that they have power? Okay, all right, we got about 8, 10, 12 people who believe that they got power. Dr. King said that we come to these shores in different ships, but we're all in the same boat now. I want you to think about that in relationship to not only the things that are going on the federal level, but you know, it can be right here in New York. we have the ability and the opportunity to actually be a part of helping to make change happen. Do me a favor as I close out. Look to the person to your left. If your neighbor doesn't know their left, help them out. It's okay. That's funny. Everybody look to the person to your right. There you go. I got folks who are now pointing so you will know which direction is your left and your right. Reach your left hand out to the person on your left. It almost sounds like hokey pokey. And reach your right hand out to the person on your right hand. And my voice is almost gone. There you go. So this is, when I talk about community genius, one of the things I was taught when I was really young is, how do you change dynamics, right? We have all these barriers that are often put to separate us, right? We speak a different language. We come from different country. We come from different economic stratas. All these different types of things people will put, and there's intentionality in that because they understand that when people touch each other in a respectable way, that it changes dynamics, right? Because we now see each other as human. We see each other as folks who are not different from ourselves. We may have some differences, but at the core, most of us are the same. And that's the reason that I ask people to reach their hand out, because people will often do more for someone else than they will do for themselves. If you have somebody else if somebody jumps off a bridge, well, maybe not jump off a bridge, but if there's a situation where you can do something, would you do it to help someone? And that's just the normal dynamic that goes on. And that's why we've got to figure out a way in this moment, sometimes when folks are so in despair, to just reach out and touch. Bring people in. Let them know that you see them. Let them know that you value them. And let them know that we can make real change happen. And that's the community genius that is so incredibly important and has worked all across this planet. Does that make sense to everyone? So I'm going to ask y'all as I close to say power. Now I'm going to give you time because I know I'm up north. And sometimes y'all a little resistant to actually being able to express yourself. Not everybody from New York, Faith. I understand that. So on 3, I'm going to ask y'all to say power. The dean is here. So it's going to be okay. 1, 2, 3. Power. That was anemic. That was just pitiful. That was so pitiful. We're going to try it again. On 3. 1, 2, 3. Power. Oh, you're almost there now. Is it getting good to you? You felt like it was 1968 at the Olympics? Did you want to put your right hand up? There it is. All right. This is the last time we're going to do it on 3. 1, 2, 3. Power. Now take that power and use it for good. Use it to help support the folks who are out here doing the work, and you are so incredibly needed. I'm Mustafa Santiago Ali. Thank y'all for a couple minutes of your time.
All right. Okay, hello. Great. Okay, let's one more time give it up for our Ackerman lecturer. Please. Thank you so much. So I do have some questions prepared, but what most of us care about here is what the students are thinking and what you're going to take away from today. So this is not to put pressure on you. As I like to say to my students, it is a warm invitation to be part of this conversation. Because I tell you that almost every faculty member I know here, and staff members, and our dean, all of us say the same thing. We care about our students. We care about our students. What about the students? What about the students? And that's your academic well-being, your emotional well-being, many other things. And those of you who have come here this evening, we really appreciate your presence. As Mustafa mentioned, you know, youth have played a really important role in many different social justice movements over the decades in this country, some of which were shown up here. And so one of the questions that you may have, that I have for you, and then also for you, Mustafa, is thinking through the first steps for a student who is not currently engaged in kind of either environmental justice or other important issues within their communities. What would some first steps be? And first, actually, I'm going to throw this to the students. And I'd like to hear from one or two of you, maybe what are some things that you either are already doing that could help some of your classmates, or that you've kind of had in the back of your mind, maybe for now or for later? I know many of you are busy, but would one or two of you like to share some things that maybe you do already in your communities or that you would like to do? Great. Be right there with a mic. Oh. Oh, yeah, no, it's you. Yeah, please.
No worries. I'll introduce myself. Yeah. How's everybody doing? My name is Francis Henry. I'm actually, it's my classmates here, and I'm a part of the MPA program. As my classmates might know, I'm actually a former student athlete here. I used to play on the women's basketball team here at Baruch back almost a decade ago. And somehow, some way, my career has shifted to where I went into fashion, and at that fashion company, I was able to then start a nonprofit for that company, geared more towards creating a pathway for students to enter the fashion industry, more specifically students that don't necessarily have those opportunities. As myself, I wasn't necessarily a student that was into fashion primarily. As I mentioned, primarily I was into sports. So I took that opportunity at my company to then raise that conversation and start that program, which I now as spearhead at the company. But essentially what I really want to get to is that then inspiring me to start my own nonprofit. So I started and I founded my nonprofit called Who Got Next. And Who Got Next is primarily for student athletes. So it's to help student athletes start their careers. So like, to get a bit deeper into my personal story, I was a student athlete here, but I was recruited to play on different levels. Baruch is a D3 school, but I knew that I didn't have any aspiration to want to play professionally, especially as a women's basketball. It wasn't what it was when I was playing as far as NIL and all these other deals. But I've always taken my education extremely serious. My parents are both immigrants. They both immigrated from Haiti, but they both have earned their masters, their doctorates, and things of that sort. So I've always been, I've always put education first. So I take great pride in starting Who Got Next and now creating this avenue for student athletes, whether we do it through internships, whether we do it through mentorships, programs. So it's fairly new. So it's nice to hear new or young people trying to do bigger things within their community, but that's pretty much my story.
Thank you. Thanks. I appreciate it. So that's a very in-depth example of someone starting multiple nonprofits. Okay, so we can have those high things to achieve. We can also start with voting as one example. And Mustafa, I'll let you add in a few more examples of what you think our students can do.
Well, I think it starts with your passion, right? So once you figure out what your passion is and how you like to engage with information, it makes it so much easier, right? So some folks like to read. Some folks like video. Some folks learn in other types of ways. So once you have that understanding and then you know what your passion is, it's so much easier to build from there. So that's one of the places I start, because you have to have the foundation of how you want to learn. And then the other part of it is being able to then link up in those spaces and places that are focused on the same things that you care about, or where the need actually exists. And you have to take it from just the reading and the video to actually being out there with folks in community. I really appreciate you talking about fashion, because fashion has a huge impact also on climate and the environment as well. Sustainable fashion things are incredibly important. You also brought another one of my passions in, which was athlete. I ran track. I was in college and played ball a little bit as well. And that's one of the reasons I joined the Green Sports Foundation, because we had opportunity to then make sure that all these amazing athletes that are there, these facilities that are in place, are doing the right thing. We've got folks who are greening their sports camps, all these different types of things. So I'd like to also share some information with you about what's happening on in the Green Sports Foundation. Yeah.
Well, thank
Sorry,
you.
I'm
It's
losing
okay.
my voice.
Okay. Thank you so much. Are there any students who have any questions before we open it up to the broader audience? And no pressure. We won't be grading you. Yes, in the corner. Well, I'm going to mic you anyway, so that people who are listening in, so you'll be extra loud, so people listening in can hear you. Please, go ahead.
Hi, my name's Jeanette Torres. I'm also in the MPA program here at Baruch. Little late, but better late than never. My question is, as someone who is really focused on the environment, even though that's not my path, mostly because I'm pretty busy in my own personal life, what would be your best advice? Like, how did you get started? What would be your best advice for someone who's young, starting out, really interested in the betterment of tomorrow as far as the environmental concerns that we have right now? What would be your best advice? How do they get into that?
Well, I think you just take a look at the places you come from and have an understanding about what are the challenges that are there. And because you want to give back in many instances to where you come from. So if you come from the Bronx, or if you come from Brooklyn or Staten Island or wherever it might be, you take a look at what's going on around and then figure out how you can help. So you asked the question how I got engaged. So I grew up in two places primarily when I was growing up. One was in Appalachia, and the other one, I know, nobody believes me. Yes, there are folks who look like me in Appalachia. And then in Michigan. And I grew up in a community that was it looked like a Norman Rockwell picture, right? But once you peeled off the veneer, right across the river was this old coal-fired power plant. And the emissions, our community was up higher, so when the winds would shift, it would blow into our community, called the fog. And a bunch of my friends' families were getting cancer. Now, this was before, anybody really knew much about environmental injustice, those types of things. Folks in my family, my father had cancer 7 times, the last time he didn't make it. A number of people in my family, my best friend's mother died of cancer. Our aunt across the street died of cancer. So I bring that into our conversation. So sometimes in the in the rural context, we often don't think about the similar types of impacts that are going on. But that was the thing that I always wondered, why were so many people getting sick in my community? And we also had well water, and there were some heavy metals and some other things that were there. And it wasn't until I went off to college and then came to EPA to do an internship that I was able to then merge my sets of experiences and the questions that I had with a group of folks. And then I began to meet all the early environmental justice leaders and others. But it all went back to my sets of experience that were going on in my community. So when students ask me, what they should do or how the intersection point is, I say it begins with your sets of experiences and figuring out what is it that you want to change? What is it that you have a passion for? And then that usually helps because there are going to be tough times when you're first starting out. You've got to know what your why is. And that was always mine, of being able to figure out and take things back home to be able to help people to have the information that they need to better protect themselves. That coal-fired power plant got shut down a number of years ago, but you still have folks who were there for decades who still carry some of the scars from that. So I don't say it to be sad. I say it as it's just a part of the reality of lots of times, if it's something that touches you and is personal to you, then that may be your intersection point. Yeah.
Okay, one more question. I know Edwin is patiently waiting to bring his class, but hopefully this has been useful.
I'm glad to be here. I'm also in the MPA program. I've been in the game for a while, but just yesterday I found out something from a student in one class about environmental damage that's actually happening. And a lot of, you say something that's personal, I think it's going to affect all of us. And what we need to realize is about how AI is now having environmental effects, which to me, I didn't know. And if it's something now that's coming of age for all these young people to know about. We're saying trying to get young people involved. This is something that is in their time. So it's not just going to be at a local level, and even if it is at local levels, it's something that, all of us are using now, or a lot of young people are beginning to think is common, but the environmental impacts on water, on energy that this new technology is bringing that no one is talking about because of the money that it generates. This is something that I think environmental health is going to be something that the younger generation is going to want to be involved in, because it's going to be so ubiquitous and such a big problem, not just in communities of color.
Yeah.
It's going to be, it's not just in low income. I think it's going to be a lot. And maybe not also in the urban communities, because we don't maybe have the land space to house a lot of the AI data centers, and in more rural places. So what we, might not see is really going to be happening in a lot of the rural communities that we as in urban centers or wherever should realize.
Thank you. Yeah. That was very well said. I'm going to add a question to it because to Mustafa, maybe you can speak a little bit to the data centers and some of what we were discussing at the table beforehand. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll give a shout out to Word in Black. Word in Black is one of the places that I write, so you can check it out. I've written some things on justice in the algorithm. There are 2 other pieces that are coming out around AI and data centers and some of the things that are in that space. So, as you so aptly shared, I mean, it is about water usage, huge amounts of water usage. We know in our country, in many locations, not only is there just droughts, but we know that water insecurity is becoming a very significant issue. Climate, agricultural practices, a number of things that are really pulling, shrinking the available water sources that we have. So you've got huge amounts of water that's in there. The energy usage will just exponentially continue to grow. The question becomes, well, there are 2 questions. Some folks don't want to see AI moving forward. Other folks say we have to green AI. That means using renewable energy to drive the huge energy demand that's in that space. So that is a question yet to be determined. It is a huge industry. You also have some other dynamics that are part of some of the data center stuff. You've got an amazing amount of heat that comes off as well, and that's a part of the cooling through the water. You also have the hum that exists. If anybody's ever been out to one of these data centers, it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and if you're one of the communities that's close by, there are all kinds of impacts that happen there. On the AI side, there's also the justice aspect that people have to pay attention to. Who owns the data? Where's the data coming from? How is it being taught to be able to engage with us is another dynamic that's going on. When you see facial recognition programs and all these other types of things, all that's tied now to AI. When you go on the internet, and you Google something, there's that AI component that's there. So it touches so many different things. We could have a long conversation about that. The question becomes, how do we make sure that there's justice, and how do we make sure that the communities that have always carried the burden, if you look at what's going on over in Memphis, South Memphis, West, and Boxtown, you've got now folks using natural gas as a driver for what folks are trying to do. So you've got those dynamics, methane and stuff going into the atmosphere and warming up stuff and causing these problems with the climate crisis. And then you've also got those impacts, cumulative impacts, that these communities have already had to carry many toxic burdens. So you've got that dynamic. AI will be something that everyone has to pay attention to and figure out how you want to get engaged. And it's growing every day in ways that you can't even imagine. So I'll leave it there because that is a deep conversation. Maybe the college will one day have both masters and PhDs in AI. Maybe you already have it. I know American University, where I taught before, now does. So it is one of the hot topics that will be around for decades and decades. Yep.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, I'll just be really brief. The NAACP has principles for AI in environmental justice. You might want to check it out online. We Act for Environmental Justice was one of the groups that Mustafa mentioned. Peggy, We Act has, you can sign up online. They have monthly meetings. If you're here in New York, in Manhattan, you can sign up to join them and find ways to get involved. That's going back to your point. And the other thing is, I don't know if there's an environmental society here at the School of Public Affairs, but that's another way in which students get very involved, is they organize not only at home, as you've been saying, but in their schools to get involved in an organized way. It's a third way in which people can get involved.
We just have to pay attention to these 21st century technologies that are coming online, evolving, growing. You know, on the other side of the AI equation, there are municipalities who are now using AI to track their water lines and their wastewater things that are going on. So it's important for us to get engaged and help frame this stuff out in a way that's beneficial and to minimize the impact. So I don't ever want to just demonize something. I want to say look at it in its fullness and then figure out how we strengthen and make it something that is useful and not harmful.
Okay, so first I would let your class go. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you, students. Thank you, Edwin, for bringing your class. We really appreciate it. And we can take maybe one or two more questions to close out our evening. Thank you all.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Does anyone have a question? If not, I have one more that I just want to, okay. I'll tell Edwin to share with his class, because one of the distinctions that I wanted you to talk about is just with environmental justice versus environmentalism, you know, because we use these terms a lot, and I think the term I'm most familiar with is racial justice, which is like an easier one to define, you know, but can you just kind of speak to that difference?
Environmental justice is about the people. So we had conservation, we had environmentalism that often did not focus on our most vulnerable communities. And the environmental justice movement said, well, wait a minute, in 1991 at the first People of Color Summit, that we have all these different types of things that are going on across the country, but people are not focusing on the individuals who are carrying the burdens. So it was twofold. We wanted to make sure environmental justice is about addressing the disproportionate impacts that are happening, but it is also about focusing on the sets of opportunities and making sure that we are investing in the ingenuity that exists inside of communities. And that's why environmental justice is so important, and that's why giving the full narrative is so incredibly important, because those who wanted to damage the movement made it sound like it was just about stopping stuff. And we were so much more than that. Yes, we don't want to continue to carry those impacts, but it is also about the sets of ideas that community has. So that's why it was so important to make sure that people, you know, especially those folks of color and lower wealth communities who often were not thought of as having innovation and ingenuity as a part of their paradigm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
I have one more question.
Okay.
There's a tension. Sorry, hello. Sorry. I find a tension between the focus that people have on communities and engaging in the community and the community genius. And so that's the way, like, the first step would be like, go into your community, think about what drives you. And then the role as citizens to push our government at whichever level to do better for us. Like, let's just focus on the environment for now, right? So to me, one of the challenges is, I mean, I don't think that they're necessarily mutually exclusive, but I feel like our government has failed us in many different ways, and some of the examples that you showed today. And, you know, the community genius is kind of filling that role, right? Nonprofits and other organizations. And I guess I wonder if they are in practice mutually exclusive, if people focus their energy so much in communities. You know, you mentioned earlier when we were talking about voting, how people have been led to believe that whether they vote or not, it doesn't matter. And I feel like some of us have been led to believe that whether they push or not, you know, this idea of power, whether they push the government or not, the government's not gonna come and save them. And so I'd just like you to speak to that tension a little bit.
Well, I do believe that the government is not going to come and save you unless you force the government to. The government has a responsibility because it is utilizing your tax dollars. So they have a responsibility to be able to use those in a way that is helping to uplift folks. How do you make that happen? You know, that's why the civic process is so incredibly important and we often just look at presidents and congressmen and senators. And those, of course, are important positions. But we also got to look at the school boards. We also got to look at county commissioners and DAs and all these other types of folks who play a role in what happens in community to be able to make sure there's real accountability in that. The environmental justice movement in the early days was not as focused on sort of the civic process and government in the way that it is now. Because now folks are also saying, you know what? We're going to run our own candidates. We're going to also make sure that we have a slate of things that we're looking for, and we're going to hold people accountable to that. There's still evolution that needs to happen in that space. The other part of the community genius is incredibly important, but we have to balance it all out also with where some resources will come from, and that is local, county, state, and federal governments. So if you unplug from one, then you're actually limiting the things that you're already paying for, making it back to your community. So that's why I don't like to bifurcate things. I understand sort of that this is a whole, and we've got to make sure that we're connected to all of what's going on. Yeah, if that helps.
Thank you so much. We have come to the end of our program this evening. I again want to thank you so much, Mustafa, for being here with us, for coming all the way up, for sharing your experience, your wisdom, and for making us laugh. That was really nice. Brought some joy, so we can all raise our hand. We've had joy in the last 7 days, 24 hours. So thank you so much for being here. Let's give him a round of applause again, please. I would like to also thank, with all my heart, the Engelman family, Rosalind and the daughters, both. And I'm not sure who you are, but one of their guests. Great. Well, thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it. We appreciate all the support the Engelman family has given to us to be able to bring in wonderful lecturers like this evening. And in a time of despair and frustration and challenges, this has really been inspirational. And as Marianne said earlier today, we need these sessions more now than ever. I'm going to follow up with those students and see what they took away from this evening, and I'm going to share it with my undergrads tomorrow morning. So I'd like to just say a few more thank yous. I want to thank Dean Ryan for being here. I want to thank everyone who has made this evening possible, doing video, doing the online stuff that's going on, and Diana Lazov, again, thank you for organizing everything, all the logistics. I'd like to thank the staff here, who I can't see, but who take care of the conference space. And I want to thank each and every one of you for being here tonight. It really makes us special, being in community. That was part of what, this is about, learning in community and hopefully taking the lessons we've learned and doing something more positive tomorrow than today. So anyway, thank you again so much, Mustafa. Thank you so much, and have a great evening, everyone. Thank you.